Hello, this is Deborah Anderson, the BlkWmnAnimator, coming back to you with another video. And in this video, I have Everett Downing Jr. Welcome.
Hey, how's it going? It's nice to be here.
Can you give a quick intro of yourself?
Yeah, my name's Everett Downing Jr. I am currently co-EP, co-creator at Netflix Animation, working on a series called My Dad the Bounty Hunter that's be coming out next year. And yeah, that's about it for now.
All right, first question. Where are you from and how was it growing up?
Where am I from? I actually grew up in Denver, Colorado, actually. This is like Denver, like in the 80s. So, I was like a poor kid coming up, really, like loved the animation, loved Saturday morning cartoons, loved comic books, I was son to a single mom, you know what I mean, who she was, amazing. She was chemist. She was trained to be a chemist, but you had to take the jobs that she had to take. She was recently divorced and stuff, so she had her hands full because it was me and my two sisters. She was raising 3 kids on her own, and we were a wild bunch. So she did her best. But Denver was a cool place to come up as a kid.
Nice. So you wanted to be a veterinarian.
Oh yeah.
Why?
Yes. Oh man. Okay. I don't know. You've been paying attention. Okay, so hilarious story. I just loved animals as a kid. It's really funny. My daughter's the same way. I just loved animals as a kid. I was like, oh, you know what? I'm going to be a veterinarian. I wanted to work at like zoos. I want to be a zoo veterinarian, kind of take care of like the hippos and the tigers and stuff. And it was funny because like I drew all the time. And my big sister, I remember her coming up to me and she kind of leaned in and she's like, you're going to be a veterinarian, right? You know that, right? She was just in my ear. I'm like, I am. She's like, you draw all the time. She's like, you need to quit playing. You need to stop acting like you're going to be a veterinarian. So one day I finally just kind of listened to her. I was like, she's right. I like comic books too much.
Nice. So as you said, your mother was a chemist. Your father was an architect. And you found out later he used to draw Flash Gordon comics. Was that like a mind blown moment?
Yeah, man, you are well informed. Yeah,
I've been doing my research.
You have, man. That's amazing. So, my mom, my mom was trained to be a chemist. She was actually going for a master's, and then she had us. So she kind of put all that stuff on pause and to kind of become a mom. My dad was an architect, and it was really funny because like he kept wanting me, like, hey, you should go into architecture. He knew I loved to draw, and he's like, oh, I used to love to draw too. And I think it was probably a ploy to kind of get me into architecture. Like he was trying to I believe that he was into comics, but he's like, hey, I used to want to do comics too. I was like, word? I was like, what, really? And he's like, yeah, man, yeah, I wanted to do Flash Gordon. I was like, what? And I wanted to find those drawings so bad. I wanted to see what those drawings, like, I think it kind of backfired on him because I was like, I'll make it for both of us, Dad. You know what I mean? I'll make the comics for both of us, So it totally blew up in his face. He's probably like, man,
So go more into what was your relationship with art and animation throughout your childhood?
Oh, okay. So we can kind of go, we can go deep. This is a platform for it. So, when I was a kid, I was, really obsessed with the comic strip, to be honest with you. Like, I really wanted to do like Garfield. I used to read a lot of Garfield. I used to read a lot of Peanuts. And then for a while, I really got into Bloom County and, of course, Calvin and Hobbes. So I actually wanted to be a comic strip artist when I kind of said like, oh, you know what? Maybe I won't be a veterinarian. Maybe I'll be a comic strip artist. And then my sister completely blew my mind when she introduced me to like I was reading comic books, but I was reading like Spider-Man and the Hulk, but I was like, these are cool, but I want to do comic strips. Then my sister's like, you need to read this. And she kind of pushed the X-Men in front of me. And I was like, whoa. I was like, this is the dopest ever, right? Like I just got so into it, right? And I was like, I want to do comic books. This is so dope. And I remember I was really like when I was in comics, like, I think when I started, it was like, I'm gonna go way back machine. Paul Smith was drawing the X-Men, and it was right during the Phoenix saga, like the Dark Phoenix saga, and that was like all that stuff just like totally blew my mind. And I got too super deep into comics. Started like loved John Byrne stuff, loved Paul Leary, like I think it was the Inking of Time or whatever. But I got so deep into it, I started studying everything that I could, and I was like, I'm going to become a comic book artist. So when I went to college, I actually fully intended on being a comic book artist. I actually went to it was really funny because my mom was trying to help me pick colleges, and she's like, hey, you should go to Ringling, because we lived in Florida at the time. She said, you should go to Ringling. And I was like, nah, I'm going to New York because I want to go to SVA. And she's like, Ringling's got a great, which is so ironic now when I think about it, because I ended up going into animation, and Ringling I just took the long way around, Deborah. So when I went, I'm at SVA, I'm like, I'm going to become a comic book artist here. I'm like, I'm in New York, Marvel's here, DC's here. I'm just going to work in college, and then they're just going to work on my pages. And every week I'm going to just hit them up, and they're going to get sick of me. Well, somewhere along the line, that never happened. I couldn't get the courage up to go into the office. But somewhere along the line, one of my college teachers was looking at my work, and they were like, hey, have you ever thought about doing animation? Just because of the way you draw and the way how you perceive things, I think you would do really well. And I remember thinking oh, okay, I really like animation, and I kind of like what Disney was doing at the time. That's doing their whole revitalization. So you got the Little Mermaid just come out a few years before, and it was kind of big, and I was like, oh, Disney's doing some cool stuff, Lion King and stuff. And then I remember I saw I remember thinking what was it? It was which one was it? Street Rat. I'm like, I'm trying.
Aladdin.
I remember seeing Aladdin going oh, that was actually, and I was like, oh, that's dope. I could actually get into that. And around that time, I was meeting a bunch of new people in New York. They were kind of blowing my mind. A lot of new concepts were coming to my mind. I was discovering all these new artists because I'm in art school, right?
Right.
And along that time, one of my good friends at the time was like, hey, man, you want to see something? I got something my buddy sent me from Japan. And we had cassettes back in the day. So he had a cassette. And I'm like, what is this? And he pops it in, and it was Akira. And I remember just being like, when you go from Aladdin to Akira, it's gonna jack you up. It's like, boom. I was like, ah, it was so mind blowing. And I'm like, this is what I have to. I have to get into animation. So I changed my major to animation, from illustration to animation. Started taking animation classes. I ended up transferring to Columbia College in Chicago because they had a film course, and they actually had a concentration in animation, which is hilarious too, because my mom was still in Florida going Ringling's still here, son. I'm like, nah, I'm on my own, Ma. So I'm in Chicago, and I'm in college, and I see a little movie by this little studio that you might have heard of called Pixar. Have you heard of that studio?
Yeah, a little bit.
So they dropped Toy Story, right? So I'm in college, and I remember at the time I'm in a 2D program, right? And everyone in the 2D program was talking whatever, man, CG can never be as good as 2D. You can't get the emotions. I was like, yeah, man, you're right. So yeah, 2D forever. And I remember sitting in the theater watching Toy Story, going yo, I better change. like, I better change majors. This is amazing. And I changed the majors like the week after I saw that movie. I was like, you know what, I'm doing this. So that's actually how I got into CG animation, you know. And Columbia had a CG course. So, and the thing that was cool about Columbia is like you had access to the equipment right away. So like, here's the thing.
Yeah.
This is like, here's CG was in its like early days, right? So everybody was kind of focused on 2D. There was 3D equipment. Not a lot of people knew how to use it, including the instructors. Like they were trying to find instructors and stuff. So you basically, if you just took the time to like learn this, like, hey, be in the labs, learn the equipment, you could do really well. And I remember learning like back then, like Lightwave for all you old heads out there, CG old heads. Remember Lightwave? I remember building my first model in Lightwave and feeling like, oh, this is the first time I got a drawing I actually was able to make that drawing in CG. And I remember the way that my teachers reacted to it. I was like, okay, I think I'm going to do good in this. So I don't know if this is too deep a dive. I'm going deep. So after that, I remember thinking, okay, so I got to learn the CG. I need to break into business. I really want to work at Pixar. That was my goal. And as I was in college, I actually got my first break into CG actually from an instructor. So I was taking a CG class for, actually it was an animation course. It was a 2D animation course called Animation 2, but it was really like a storyboarding class. And I was taking a 2D course called Animation 2, but it was really a storyboarding class. And my instructor was this amazing individual named Luis Contreras. And Luis Contreras, basically, he kind of brought me in under his wing. And he's like, hey, you know, I see you're super talented. He kind of like, I always say that he's the one who gave me the passion for storytelling, because he was all about story, all about like, you know, like bringing story to life and touching people through story. And unfortunately, he passed away. But he was such a big influence on me and like gave me that passion to get out there. Like I owe a lot to him. So he was the one who actually got me my first job actually in CG. And I worked at Big Idea working on VeggieTales. So I worked on VeggieTales back in the day because it used to be based in Chicago. So yeah. I don't know how deep you want me to go. I got a long history here, so I can keep going.
Yeah. So your sister beat you out for a scholarship at Art Institute. What does she do now?
She does. She did. Yeah, I was salty about that. Man, you're well informed. I was super salty about that. But she's still doing art right now. She teaches actually. She's actually working over at she just started a job at Glendale High School, and she's actually teaching animation and art, digital art over there. So yeah, she beat me
that
out.
was suck if she beat you out and then she's like working at CVS or something.
Oh my gosh, that would drive her crazy. That'd drive her crazy. She she gave me a lot of. She was very inspirational to me though. Like she kept kicking my butt. So
that's good. So what is it that you love about animation?
Oh man, that's a deep question. It's I think what I love is this. I think maybe it's this the suspension of belief. I think for me, I feel like it opens just the idea that something is animated. It kind of like I think a person naturally kind of opens up their suspension of belief more, which I think can kind of open someone up to more like pure storytelling. I think sometimes, and I love it because you can use it to like present subjects and stories that like some people might like think is ridiculous or whatever, but if the underlining story is touching or the underlying story is impactful, because of that suspension of belief, it can kind of get to you more. So, for example, like, you know, Ratatouille, you know, it's about a rat that cooks in the kitchen, right? And like, just that, like the fact, like, okay, so a rat that controls a human cook who's like a master chef, you can do that in live action, but people will be kind of like, all right, like that's gross, first of all, because you kind of use real rats and you kind of do mouth replacements, and it sounds disgusting. But when you do it in animation, it almost puts you in this state of mind where you're like, oh man, that's cool. And then it really opens you up to a story. It's like, no, this is a story about an artist who wants to be able to express himself through cooking and stuff. So I love that level of storytelling, and yeah, I think it can be super effective. I think, you know, you can communicate ideas in a way that people are more receptive to and have more impact in the long run.
So this is a good time to highlight some of the projects that you've worked on. This part is like, oh, a Black person worked on that, or so I'm possibly not going to say everything, but I'm going to say like most things.
Okay, all right, let's see.
So let me list them out. Okay, you worked on several Pajama Sam properties, which was my like I played Pajama Sam. I just want to say that.
Okay, so I think there's another Everett Downing, maybe, because I never worked on that one. And I keep going to IMDb. I'm like, I didn't work on this. But then they keep adding more. And I'm like, I know, unless it's something I don't remember, but I never worked on Pajama Sam. Which is hilarious, because people say, like, dude, that was my jam. I'm like, I didn't work on that. I'm sorry. I don't know.
Like, oh.
Yeah, exactly. Not as excited. Like, oh, okay. But I did work on Ratatouille. Okay.
So, do you know of anything else on your IMDb that you're like, nah, I didn't work on that?
Well, mention another one, and I'll let you know. There's Pajama Sam, and then there was another one. Yeah, go through it. I'll let you know.
Quack Pack.
Yeah, I didn't work on that one either. VeggieTales, I worked on that.
I've heard you mention 3-2-1 Penguins.
Yes, that was an amazing
Ice
project.
Age, Gone Nutty, Robots.
Yep.
Code Name, Kids Next Door.
Didn't work on that one. Didn't work on that one.
Didn't work on which one?
Code Name, Kids Next Door. Didn't work on that one. It didn't work on Rugrats either. Which is funny, because I remember testing for Rugrats back in the day. I did a test for it. I did a test for Rugrats, and I did a test for Cat Dog. But I ended up not working out of those places.
Ice Age, Meltdown.
Yes.
Ratatouille, Wall-E, Up, Toy Story 3.
Yes.
So pause. I want to work on Toy Story 3 after being like monumentally like changed after Toy Story 1.
Okay, so that was amazing, because I remember thinking, so I want to talk a little bit about sort of my history of Pixar, because I was trying to get there for such a long time, and I'd literally given up on it. Like, I think I was working on Ice Age, and I heard about Incredibles, and I'm like, I gotta get on Incredibles. Brad Bird is directing a movie about superheroes. That sounds like Everett Downing needs to be working on it. And I remember trying really hard to get on it, and I didn't. And I remember being like, just having like an existential crisis. Like, I can't believe they didn't pick me. You know, I was so sad. And so I kind of gave up on like the idea of working at Pixar. I'm like, you know what? Maybe it's just not in the cards for me. And what did they say? Like, every time you kind of give up on something, like, you know, but because you're persistent, it kind of shows a way, it kind of comes back. That's pretty much what happened. So a really good friend of mine, Dave Pang, he's an animator over at Pixar now, which is hilarious. At the time we were both working at Blue Sky. And at the time he's like, hey, Ev, you know, Pixar approached me, but I just signed a contract. You're not on the contract. You should talk to them. And I remember reaching out to them to talk to them. And they were like, yeah. Like, I remember being so nervous in the interview. I'm sweating. My palms were sweating. And it was really funny because I was actually in the middle of I was in New York and I was in the middle of moving. So not moving, but like searching for a new place to live, a new home. And I'm in Harlem and I'm doing like a walkthrough on a place in Harlem that I was thinking about moving to. And I get the call. So I'm doing the interview for Pixar in this apartment in New York, going like, I can't believe this. Like, this is crazy. And I ended up getting the job, which is mind blowing. So right around the time, the thing that's cool about Pixar is, like, you know, a lot of the movies are kind of working, they work on them over years, right? So you might be on, like, for example, I was on Ratatouille at the time, but like, you know, the next two or three movies were actually kind of on story reel. So they're in various stages of development. So like at the time, I'm working on Ratatouille. Wall-E was up in story reel. Up was up in story reel, and so was Toy Story 3. And I remember seeing Wall-E and just being like mind blown. Like, I can't believe I'm going to work on that next. This is as I'm working on Ratatouille. I'm like, well, actually, I didn't know if I was going to be working on it because I was only hired for the one movie. So I was like, I'm just going to have to like bust, bust my ass to like get this done. And I remember right after, like a few weeks later, they showed Up. And I remember being like, this is incredible too. So right around the time I started to make the transition to the next movie, they showed Toy Story 3. And I'm like, I can't believe how. Because I was kind of like, Toy Story 3, how can you, this is the third movie. I mean, how fresh could it really be? And I remember seeing it being like, how is it this good? This is amazing. And then just the fact, like, I remember there's a bunch of really good friends of mine, really, really good friend of mine, Aaron Hartline. We've been we worked together at Big Idea, and we've been kind of bootstrapping each other through the industry. We were both at Pixar at the time, and we were starting on Toy Story 3, and we were just talking about how we used to reminisce at Big Idea. Can you imagine what it'd be like to work at Pixar? And we were both on Toy Story together, which is the movie that inspired us both. And we were talking about how mind-blowing it was. Like, this is crazy that I'm actually going to work on this movie that is responsible for me being in the industry. So it was incredible. Right.
So unpause. Cars 2, Brave.
Cars 2. Yes.
The Legend of Mordu.
Yes.
Monsters University. Penguins of Madagascar.
Yep. I got a little bit of a gap for you. Interesting fact.
Okay.
So right when so Monsters University was the last movie I animated on. I made a switch into the story department, and I ended up working on a few of the Pixar shorts, including the Legend Toy Story, The Time Forgot, which was pretty awesome. So I ended up boarding on a couple, and then I went over to DreamWorks to work on Penguins.
Cool. Did you work on that movie named June?
I did. I boarded on the short June. Yep. Yeah, directed by John Cars.
Boss Baby.
Boss Baby. Yeah.
Captain Underpants.
Emoji Movie. Emoji Movie. Yeah.
Of course, Hair Love. So, were you the director on all the episodes of We People?
No, I directed the, I think it's the 8th episode. That's titled We the People, actually.
Oh, okay.
So basically, oh yeah, thank you. That one's like, I think there were 10 episodes, each directed by a different director.
Okay. Yeah. Vivo, which I just saw.
Yes, worked on Vivo.
And of course, My Dad the Bounty Hunter.
Yes, and to kind of close the gap, Jorge Gutierrez's show that's going to be coming out. I think it's coming out in October. Maya and the Three. I worked on that while I was between. It's like I left Sony. I worked, and then I went to work on Maya and the Three, and I was kind of working on Maya and the Three and Hair Love at the same time.
I feel like your story is very like make it work with not being able to afford to stay at SVA, having to figure out how to animate in 3D at Blue Sky. What is the importance of having a goal in mind, even if the goal is a couple times, and just stumbling your way to it?
Yeah, it's so that's kind of like the biggest lesson I learned, where it's like, being flexible and like, there were a couple of times in my career where you just kind of have that conversation with yourself. And, animation is a field where like you can do a lot of things. I could be, I could be a previs artist. I could be a modeler. I could have been a modeler. I could have been like, I was storyboard artist. I was an animator. But you get to these points and you're like, hey, so this is a really great opportunity that's here in front of me. But, like, what is it that like, what's the passion that kind of sings to me? Or even before that, like, just even breaking into the industry, it's like, it can be heavy, just getting a lot of like rejections. I got a lot of rejections, you know what I mean? And you got to kind of talk to yourself and say like, okay, so, this is the level where I want to be. If I can't get that job, maybe I'm not at that level yet. What do I need to do? Or sometimes it's like just steps. So for example, I couldn't get to Pixar right away. But I was able to get a job at Blue Sky just because I was hustling. I just wanted to work on feature and wanted to get that experience. It turned out to be such an incredible experience. I met a lot of people who are still my friends to this day. It was a scrappy crew. We were kind of putting this movie together in New York, and working with Chris Wedge was incredible. I learned so much. And it's all about sort of like it's all about how you like your intention when you come into these opportunities, right? So a lot of times I look at things and I'm like, what do I want to do? What are the opportunities that are available to me? And how can I use, if this isn't where I want to be, how can I use these opportunities that are available to me to leverage me into those situations where I can grow into these positions that I want, and I knew for a very long time that I wanted to be a storyteller, right? Like I wanted to tell stories, even comic books, like even comic strips. Like these are just like, it's storytelling. I remember when I worked at a Big Idea, I would always tell someone, I want to, like, I don't even see myself as an animator, or I see myself as a storyteller, So a lot of it's like kind of having that clarity, knowing what you want to be, and trying to figure out the direction to get there. And it's a combination of like, it's a little bit of luck. There's a little bit of like, looking at your opportunities and how you can sort of leverage those. And then there's, I think, attitudes goes a long way. I always tried to be, I'm like, well, you know what? Because, I can say like, I'm a good animator. I'm not the best, I'm not the best animator, but I'm a good animator. I know how to do it. But I'm also, I like to pride myself on being a joy to work with, like I'm going to do my best to try to get the best shots for you, and I feel like just having that attitude that served me really well and got me a lot of jobs. And when things didn't go the way I wanted them to, sometimes I was always amazed at how like a connection or somebody I worked with before was there to be like, hey, you should come work over here with us,
What made you tackle your 365 Supers project? What was that?
All right, so that came out of I was in a rut, an artistic rut, and I felt like I wasn't happy with what I was drawing. I felt like a little creatively stifled, like, and I felt like, hey, you know what? Like I need something to kind of break out of like an art. It was almost like a I had a like a what do they call those? Like it was an art glut or whatever. And I remember talking to a really
Yeah.
good friend of mine, Austin Madison. He's a story artist at Pixar. And we were just working. And he's like, hey, man, you know what you need to do? Just give yourself a project, like just draw something different every day just to kind of like. And I was like, oh, man, that's a great idea. So then I saw it as a way to kind of challenge myself. It's crazy now that I think about it now. I'm like, I can't believe I did that. And I'm like, well, you know what? Like I'm going to challenge myself and I'm going to put it out there so people can hold me, so I can kind of hold myself accountable because I put it out there and it's like, hey, I said I was going to do it, so I better do it. And I'm like, how hard could this be? This is not that hard. Well, let me tell you, you get around 60 to 70, your brain's like, I don't know, paperclip man. You're like looking around, you're like dollar man, dollar man, like you just start. But it really was amazing because, once you get to a certain point, like once I got to like around the hundreds, then it kind of came back around because what inevitably happens, like you're like, all these dope guys at first, right? And then you get, and they're like, these guys aren't as good. And then you kind of go absurd. And you're like, you know what? Like, Dill Pickle Man, like you just start picking up like these really crazy ideas. But then those can be like the most fun. And creatively for me, it was like an explosion. Like it was such a great exercise. I'm glad I did it. Don't know if I would do it again, but it was amazing.
Let's see. So, for your like the Book of Mo project, what made you decide to have a main character that grew up in foster care?
So that was such it's such an interesting story of how that evolved. So obviously, I came up with the idea and I decided to do it as comic because I'm like, hey, you know what, this is kind of a bigger idea. There's some themes that are a little bit more adult, but I want to write the story because it's really cool. It changed a lot. I came up with the idea, no joke, from a video game. I was playing a video game. It was an online game called City of Heroes, and I just was making a hero, and I was like, oh, this hero's dope. And it was like this big stone guy. He had a stone, he had a jewel in his chest, and I was like, oh, this is cool. And I'm like, what's going on with that? And I came up with this whole backstory for this. Oh, maybe this person is trapped inside, and like, what's going on with the person? So I came up with this whole story, and it kind of turned into this thing where, like, and it's funny because you look at things afterwards, like, and you realize, oh, I was trying to tell this story in my mind, but it's deconstructing it. And I think it's because, I lost both my parents when I was younger. I wasn't too young, but I was 19, 18 when I lost my mother, and 20 when I lost my father. And just something about that is it's such a paradigm shift. It's hard for anybody to go through anyway, but like when you're in your developmental years, it's like it can be devastating, right? And there's something that I thought about where it's like when I look back, I remember the moment I decided, like, you know what, like, I'm gonna make my life mean something for them, because they put so much into me and like to show that love for them. So I kind of became obsessed, not obsessed, but the story idea of like a character, like, if you lose that formative part too soon, some people take it one way and they go and they just kind of like get lost in it and they kind of let it overwhelm them. And then some people kind of take it as a challenge and they kind of like cling to the teachings of their parents and kind of like use that to kind of, and that's kind of what I wanted to get into, the story. And it's really interesting because it literally was me deconstructing it later because, I've been writing the story and trying to like get it going. And when I look back, I'm like, oh, this is totally, because I lost my parents and like, how you can kind of take it like, hey, you know what? I'm going to put their values forward. Like I'm going to live by that in a way to kind of like venerate them. Right. And to kind of put them up, So I there's something that's very I think I want a character who can inspire people by that, like kind of like living through that adversity and becoming a great person, you
know. What did you learn about running a crowdsourcing campaign that you kept with you?
More planning. Do more planning. You know, it was amazing. Like, now I learned a lot of things. Well, I learned a lot of things, actually. So it was a really great experience. I actually feel like I did really well considering how poorly prepared I was. I actually think I did really well. I think if I were to do it again, I definitely would give people more heads up. I definitely would build to it. Like, hey, you know what? Like, let's make sure you build that audience first. And then I would kind of like activate a lot of my friends like a lot earlier and say like, hey, I'm going to do this when this drops, like, you know, get that out, put it out, retweet it or whatever. And then there's a lot of things where it's just like, you know, because I didn't know how like a lot of these things work, like, you know, hey, I need to get press for, like, how do you get press for these things? I made a lot of mistakes. Some people out there definitely like, got a little bit of my money. They're like, thank you. And they kind of disappeared. So I think just as a business person, it just made me more savvy, right? It's made me more like, I ask a lot more questions now. I'm like, all right, so like, how does this work? Look at I read the contracts, and got a lawyer to do that. So like, hey, does this make sense? So I think just the savviness is just a lot. Like, if I were going to do one now, I think it'd be a lot more successful.
How has starting in a more 2D way, being able to draw and working in pre-production helped you in 3D?
You know what's funny? I actually think that when I was doing 2D, this is like early in my career when I was like in college and like doing storyboards, you know, because you're drawing so often, you need to get like a shorthand. You need to kind of be able to like get that muscle memory, but you also kind of have to get like a spatial sort of awareness. So I remember taking like, you know, I was taking like a lot of life drawing classes just because I wanted my storyboard, like my storyboards to be more the solid construction of the characters. And I remember I also started taking some sculpture classes. And it's interesting because sculpture classes really help you sort of form those things in your mind. So when I went into CG, which actually was only like a year or two later when I was in school, it was really interesting because I remember I had a much better idea about like how I was going to kind of create those characters when I was building them. I modeled a bunch of characters for sort of CD projects in school, and I remember feeling like, oh yeah, I know. Like, I remember having that like sense, especially when it comes to cartoon characters and like how they turn around. Because one of the biggest problems at that time was, you know, you would design a character, and then that character looks great, and then when you would try to bring it into the computer, something just gets lost, and it kind of takes on a weird potato shape or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like, and you would look at the drawing, and you'd be like, "That's not that," you know. But because I was like taking all these classes and learning a lot from some of my mentors and stuff, I was able to like really take that 2D sensibility and kind of like push it in CG early in my career.
Nice. Okay, so personally, as a 3D person, I see people make commentary where they feel like they have to down 3D in order to uplift 2D. And there are some valid points of view, but I feel like the industry has made people dislike 3D because of their improper use of it. What do you think is being done and what needs to be done in 3D that would make people more people fans of it?
Yeah. Well, so I think so I've got lots of feelings about the 2D versus I think it's all animation. So we shouldn't bash each other, you know, like it's all good stuff, you know what I mean?
Right.
There's certain things that you get
Mhm.
from 3D CG that you don't get from 2D and vice versa. And they're just different things. Like nobody's hating on stop motion.
Right.
Everybody loves it. You know, we should feel like that about everything. I do think because
Mhm.
there was a glut for a while of a certain style of CG animation, people just kind of get tired of
Mhm.
like, yeah, okay, so you just have something and you render, render the hell out of it, right? And
Mhm.
people just got kind of tired. It's like anything. It's like when you push a bunch of, a bunch of one thing, people kind of get tired of seeing it, which was why, Peter Ramsey, like Phil and Chris
Yeah.
and, Spider-Verse was such a breath of fresh air because it's like, no, we don't have to do that. We can break out beyond that. So I think,
Mhm.
what can help is like, see like CG as artists as a rule can kind of embrace like, hey, you know what? Like, let's see, like, what can I do different, And you don't have to like spend a lot of time
Mhm.
trying to like come up with something as elaborate as Spider-Verse, because Spider-Verse, like, let me tell you,
Right.
a lot of attention, a lot of time, a lot of talent went into that.
Yeah.
I know some people, it broke some people to figure that out. They did an amazing job. But just thinking
Mhm.
about like, hey, we don't have to go to the default over rendered, over textured characters, and
Mhm.
environments. Like, I'm always looking for like, okay, so like CG is just a medium, right? Like, how can we present it in a way that's
Mhm.
different, And there are, and
Mhm.
here's the thing. Here's the thing that kind of like we kind of have to wrap our head around. People know this. It's like, a lot of times people trying to get like, oh, I'm gonna make my CG look like 2D, or like I'm gonna try to make
Mhm.
my 2D look like CG. And I think when you do that, you're kind of chasing like, like a unicorn or whatever. Like, it's a lot of sadness comes out of it, and like you don't have anything to show, right? Because it's
Mhm.
you're not playing to its strengths, right? Um, I
Right.
think, like, for example, if you're trying to do a CG project and you're trying to make it look 2D, your approach has to be different. Like, your approach to how you animate is going to have to be different. And if you want to get like all the more human or like more organic feel like that, because this, I feel like 2D is pure emotion, right, coming out onto a page, right, like a person's
Mhm.
manipulating a piece of
Right.
lead over paper, or a pen over
Mhm.
digital, and you're getting more of a like the emotion. Whereas like if you have a CG head, that's how the CG head looks, and if you turn it, it's going to feel very automated. But if you don't want that, you got to kind of work against that, and it's all about knowing those rules and how to
Mhm.
break them, and being able to
Mhm.
put the time into figuring that stuff out. I don't know
Yeah.
if that answers your question or
It did.
not.
So you've worked with people like John Lasseter, Brad Bird, Pete Docter, Mark Andrews, and more. What have you picked up from the various directors you've worked with that you've decided to adopt in your approach as a leader?
um Yeah, so I ain't gonna lie, I got to work with some pretty amazing directors, and it's really interesting. The keys that I kind of picked up that are super important is like, knowing what I want, right? So like when I go into a situation and when I'm making decisions, like, if I know I'm gonna have a launch, like if I know I'm launching a sequence, I'm gonna be very like, I'm gonna note myself. I want to be super informed when I go in that. I want
Mhm.
people to get the idea, because people feel people feel confident when you're confident. If I go into a room and I'm like, uh, I'm not this, it might be that, it might be this, people start to get nervous and they're like, does this person know what they want? But if I go into the room and I say like, so this is what I'm looking for, even if I don't know exactly, I might be like, so this person's in like, is in this place and it's completely dark. I want to feel like a dream. I want it to feel like I'm gonna try to inform them. I'm gonna try to give them cues that's gonna help them, touchstones that's gonna help them make the decisions, creative decisions. I've also learned, because I've seen good examples and bad examples of because I've been on the other side, I can see how it comes across of like there's some things I found that are super important. Like I found that transparency is like super important. If you do stuff and you don't tell people about it, a lot of people get upset. A lot of people get hurt. I found that being like more open is better than being closed. So for example, like I try to give information to like my art director, but I'm not going to say this is the way I want. I don't want anything else. I leave it open. Be like, this is kind of what I'm looking for. But if you have suggestions to some stuff, I the biggest thing is like I know that I'm not the expert on everything in the room. You know what I mean? So it's like I know what I want to go for, but like I don't know the best way to draw something. That's what I have my amazing art director for. I don't know exactly what shot I maybe want on here. That's why but I've got this crazy supervising director. Usually I do, but like I'm open to suggestions. So people, when they come to me, they're like, hey, you know what? I boarded this, but like you wanted, but I have this scene, and tell me what you think. And if it's better or it fits better than what I was thinking, I'm not afraid to be like, you know what? That's cool. Go with that. So, I mean, that's a big part of it. It's like a lot of people, when you think of a director, it's not like, I don't think of it as like, this is my vision, you do this. I mean, that's part of it, but I see it more as a conductor where it's like, okay, so this is the symphony we're going to do, but like we're working together as an orchestra, and we got to embrace like, how we all work together and how it kind of flows to become this amazing piece of animation in the end. So.
Yeah, because when you're a leader but don't act like the expert, it's like you hire all these artists, like you saw their Instagram or their website and they had this like thing, but then you don't allow them to do it. You just allow them to, like, you make them do what you want to do, and it's like you can, like you said, you can be surprised to be like, oh, that actually works better if you kind of leave it open-ended and allow people to be the expert that they are.
And it's funny because I think a lot of people are afraid. Some people might be afraid of losing control or like not like seeming like they don't like. Oh, I don't want people to think I don't know what I'm doing. But I always feel like at the end of the day, I say yes or no. You know what I mean? So I feel confident in that. So it's like you might pitch an idea, but if it doesn't feel like something I want, I go like, that's great. I don't want to do that way. Like, let's maybe do it this way. And at the end of the day, if you realize that is that you have the ability to do that, then I feel like it all works its way, like works out, right? Like that's just my belief.
So, okay, question. I saw you in the Netflix Taking Up Space video a few years ago. Did you work on anything with Motown Magic?
I did not. So I did not work on anything with Motown Magic. So at that time I was working on My End of 3. So they were literally like, we want to talk to Black animation creatives working at Netflix right now. And I think at the time, like they knew I was working on Maya, and they just asked me like, hey, so do you want to be a part of this? And it was an important video. It's like I want people to know, like, hey, we're out here, we're working, we're doing stuff. So it's really funny though. A lot of people thought I like worked on Magic. I was like, no, I didn't work on that. So.
Yeah, because you like before this interview, I'm like, he doesn't really say anything about Motown Magic. They just kind of put him in front of them.
Yeah, it was really funny. I was like, okay. But I think a big part of that was, again, we're we're like this small resource, so.
Yeah. So, being Black in a predominantly white industry, has your background ever felt like a spotlight or affected you in any way?
So when you say spotlight, do you mean like to feel like I've been called out because of my race? Or what do you mean when you say spotlight?
Has it made you feel has it made you feel like out of place, or have you ever dealt with anything because of your blackness? Or
It definitely made me feel out of place, like especially early in my career. I was like, I mean, like I thought it'd be, I didn't think there would be a lot of us, but I thought there would be more than there was. Like there were a few times where I was the only black person in creative, and I'm looking around like this is crazy. Definitely made me feel spotlighted. I think the place that I've worked, everybody's been super respectful. Nobody's done anything like really messed up to me. I think that it is really interesting. Like I think just me, I'm such a go-getter. I kind of go out of my way to kind of make people feel comfortable, which is something I don't do as much anymore. I'm like, this is me. Like you gotta deal with it. That's kind of how I am now. But I think because of like how I've been in the past, like I can balance it really well. I think the thing that's really interesting is kind of how, which I think has gotten a lot better, but like, I think how people sort of approached me and black content in the past, where it's just like, I feel like it feels almost like, should we talk to Everett about this black character? No, that's weird, right? That's racist, right? Like, no, let's not do that. And a lot of times I'm like, y'all gonna talk to me about this black character? Like, you guys want my opinion? No? Okay, cool. You don't want my opinion? All right. So that's the biggest thing, and that kind of comes out of like just sort of, I don't know, I think it comes out of ignorance and just fear. Fear is like one, like fear of messing up, which now people like there's a lot more open conversations, like, and in the past I didn't want to say anything because I'm like, hey, you know what, I'm just a scrub, like I'm just an animator, lowly animator, like they're not going to want my opinion. But like now if I'm in a room, I'll be like, cool, so like, the hair looks off, right? Like I can say that now. I have the confidence to do that. Where in the past I might be like, oh, I guess they're just gonna give that black character green eyes. Like, and everyone else, no, okay, cool. None of his family has green. Okay, cool. That's a decision, that sort of thing. You know what I'm talking about, Deborah. You know what I'm talking about.
Man, I went to school at RIT, which is in upstate New York, and luckily I got my first 3D class in the spring of my freshman year, and we had to do like we had to do a head. A few people decided to do black head. 2 of us was black, 2 was white.
Oh.
The 2 white dudes, like one guy, the hair looked like, when you get a scab, like it's like,
oh,
I'm like, why does his hair look like that? And then he had like red lips. And then
no.
The other the other white person who did a black person had like whitish pink lips. I'm like, do y'all look at black people? And I was so upset because like I had like a CD or DVD or something that I had to turn in, and my stuff was like not working. And I'm like, I did an awesome black person, but I could not show it. Like luckily another black woman did a little black child, and she like saved the day. But I'm like, this DVD, it didn't burn correctly.
You know what's funny too, Deborah, when you say that? Like there's so much that is just that where you're just like looking at that black person sitting next to you, just look at them closely. Don't look away. Like just pick up their features, you know what I mean? Like it's that easy. I study all yoga. I study all y'all. I'll try to get y'all right. Like just take a second, take a minute,
And like in the Dan Haskett interview, which I mentioned him to you earlier, like he was like, sometimes it's just like they don't see us, like, and so they can't do it correctly. Like just look at us. You can just look.
Yeah, it's super easy. It's super easy. And just ask us too. Okay, how's this look? What do you think? We'll tell you.
So when has black been an asset?
Being black being an asset, I definitely feel like just recently, and a part of it, like, you know, I don't know. A part of it is I have been doing this for a while. So part of it, I think, is just like normal career movement. But I will say I've gotten career movement that I never got, like just recently, that I never got before. So, you know, I've been doing this for a while, and being able to, like, I kind of went from like, oh, I'm a storyboard artist, to like, oh yeah, now you're a showrunner, like with nothing in between, never being in a leadership position. So I definitely think that's because of, you know, initiatives, you know, after George Floyd and all the recent events. People are like, finally like, okay, so you know what, let's look around and see who's here and what they're doing. And they're like, oh, hey, you know, we got this guy Everett. He's been here since, you know, 2001, making animated movies. Maybe we should ask him if he had some opinions on something. You know, I do feel like it definitely, and that doesn't give me a free pass for sure. I still have to come in. I still have to do the work. But it definitely gives opportunities that I never had in the past, and it's pretty wild. It's pretty wild. And I would say that's within the last 2-3 years.
What's a story you've never gotten to talk about in your many interviews?
Ooh, a story I've never got. Oh my goodness. Okay, that's a question. Wait, is it animation related or like just in general, like something I've never been able to talk about?
Like just something like you're like, nobody would ever ask me this or think to ask me this, or they just never have asked me about this.
Oh, okay. You know, one thing I never really got a chance to talk about was like how I kind of made some of the transitions between story and animation that I've made. And specifically, there's one story. So I've been able to like make the jump between story and animation pretty much throughout my career. I think partially part of that is because when I started in animation, I wanted to be an animator, and I got a job storyboarding. Okay, and then as I was storyboarding, I still felt like I wanted to be an animator. So when I made the transition, so I made a transition while I was at Big Idea, and I was actually, that's the whole 3-2-1 Penguins thing. So 3-2-1 Penguins was Big Idea's attempt to like start a new property, and basically they were kind of polling, like, you know, everyone in the office, like, does anybody want to work on this? And me and a bunch of my friends were like, yeah, we want something with limbs, and like we want to be able to like, yeah, you know, create something. And I remember, you know, they talked about 3-2-1 Penguins, and because, you know, at the time I was storyboarding, but I actually was able to like, I did a lot more on 3-2-1 Penguins. I ended up doing like, so first of all, they created a title for us. They made it a team, and on the team they had this philosophy of the generalist, and the generalist, basically whatever skill sets you were bringing to the table, that's kind of what you would be responsible for. So me, you know, I was bringing storyboarding to the table. I brought design, I brought modeling. I ended up doing modeling on some characters, and I brought animation. So there are other people, like again, my buddy Aaron Hartline. He was doing designs with me. He was animating. He was doing brain design and animating. My buddy Daniel Lopez, who's art director over at Pixar now, he was doing art, but he was also, I think he might have even done some boards at some point. So basically, the generalized, like we were wearing several different hats. And that was my opportunity to actually put like the animation reel together. So because I was animating on this show, I had my boards. I had tried to apply to Blue Sky as a story artist, but it ended up, instead of hiring me, they ended up hiring Enrico Casarosa, which is good because he's amazing. But he's beat me on a job twice, I have to say, 2 times. But he's incredible. Because I didn't get the story job, the next year I had a reel, because I've been working on 3-2-1 Penguins, and that reel actually got me the job at Blue Sky. So that's actually how I ended up going from storyboarding on series to animating in a feature. And at that time, there weren't a lot of like CG animators. So while I was working at Blue Sky, we were kind of between projects because we were working on. We just finished Ice Age. They were starting working on robots, and they knew that I storyboarded, so I ended up doing some pre-production storyboarding on that. So just having those two skill sets, I was able to kind of like jump back and forth. And then, I did that for a while. And at the time, I was loving storyboarding, so I tried to stay in storyboarding, but they needed me in animation. They're like, no, you gotta animate. I was like, and I remember I kept trying to get back into story. I finally get into story at Blue Sky, and then I got the opportunity to animate at Pixar, and I'm like, I'd be crazy if I passed up an animation job at Pixar. So I went back into animation, and while I was animating at Pixar, I was able to like make the transition back into story. So it was a crazy journey, but like I wouldn't change anything. I learned a lot.
Cool. So as of, I don't know if you consider yourself a veteran, but as somebody who has a lot of years in the animation industry, what have you decided is your purpose in regards to Blackness and Black professionals in animation? I know you reached out to Matthew Cherry about Hair Love, and then you kind of got involved through Karen Tolliver. Like, what have you decided is your purpose?
Not too deep, but so I see my purpose is twofold. My first one of my big purposes is like, I'm looking at the long game. I'm looking at the point. I want to be instrumental in helping Black characters go from novelty to like, accepted, perfectly acceptable and viable characters with their own stories. And we're not looking at it as like, oh, this is a Black story. No, this is a story and the Black character is the lead. It's all about the lens, and that's why it's super important that we have Black creators in those seats so they can tell their stories from their point of view and their perspective. That is what I'm passionate about. That's why I go forward. Just like, hey, you know what? Like, if you get me, I'm probably going to be directing. Like, if you get me on my own, that main character is probably going to be Black because I'm Black and I've lived all my life as a Black person, and that's my perspective and that's my point of view. Does that mean, like I don't think that like, I kind of want to evolve beyond that. So it's like, hey, you know what? I'm going to do something that feels kind of like Gravity, but like, it's a Black lead, and no matter what, everyone is going to empathize with that character. That's one of my goals. And another one of my big goals is I want to be able to break talent. You know what I mean? Because I know how, just as somebody who struggled for a really long time to sort of be seen and be regarded, and just kind of, I'm not trying to make soft story, but just being looked over, for a long time. I know how painful that is, and I want to be able to like, there's a lot of talented Black people, Black folk out there, and I want to be able to help break that talent, So those are big goals of mine.
So with like working with hair, what has been your journey in doing your daughter's hair? Can you say that you're good at it?
You know what? I can say I am good at it. I thought I was better, but then my niece came in and she did it one time. I was like, oh, okay. So I'm just like good for a dad, basically. I see, I'm gonna say that I was very good for a dad, like I'm not like, I can't do anything super crazy. If I want to try to do something super crazy, I gotta like actually do some YouTube and like practice on like my daughter's got like a little head that I have to practice on. But I'm not as good as I thought. But I did some cool stuff, especially when they were young. I did some cool stuff, so. I can hang.
That's what's up.
Yeah, exactly. Now she won't let me touch it, but it's all good. She's at that age though. She's 12 now.
Yeah.
She's like, no, I'm good. I'm good, Dad. Thank you.
Yeah, I can't be going out the house looking like any old kind of thing.
Right. No, not at 12. She's like, no, I'm good.
So, like, what was your involvement on things like Canvas and Substance?
Oh, so both of those, like, so I'm good friends with Frank Abney. I'm good friends with Jamal Bradley, and you know, Substance was a project that actually I was working with him for a little bit, but I ended up getting like super busy, and I wasn't able to like help him out as much. You know, I feel bad about that. I wish I could have been able to help him more, but I was able to like give him some like, you know, they've shown me their reels. I'll give them feedback, that sort of thing, and I think that can be like super helpful. And that's what I did on Canvas as well. Like, you know, Frank showed me, you know, clips and showed me some of the animation reel, and I was just giving feedback on it, you know. So which I think is like, I think that's super important. I think it's really important that you have a group of peers that you trust, that you can get your opinions through, you get opinions from, and not feel like they're either, you know, like being too harsh, because I've seen that, or being too like, oh yeah, man, that looks great, and not being honest to them. Because that's actually the worst. I've actually had that where I've shown things to peers and they're like, oh yeah, no, it's really great, and then I came back like, oh yeah, like, you know, I thought that they were turning you down because I thought that you should have took that out of your reel, and I was like, well, why didn't you say that? You know, like, you should have said that. So I try to be, you know, what do they say? Like, be the change that you want to see. So I'm that's how I live my life right now. So
yeah. So after working on like Hair Love, you're working on Dad the Bounty Hunter. What is the importance of representation of Black dads in animation, and what feedback have you received from men on this?
Well, I mean, the importance is paramount, right? Like, I think, you know, just if you look at the history of kind of Hollywood and how Black male has been portrayed, it's not always in the best light. In fact, I can say that most of it has not been in a great light. So, you know, I think there's like again, which is part of one of my goals. Like, there's there has to be a humanizing that's done, so people know, like, no, like, we're dads just like you, like, you know, we might you know, have better wardrobe, but that doesn't make us any different, you know. Sorry. But yeah, I mean, it's all about humanizing, you know, and it's super important. Like, that's why Hair Love, I was like, you know, as a Black dad with daughter, I did her hair. I'm like, yeah, this is something that people need to see, because you know, it's part of that you know, rainbow of representation, you know. And then there was a second part of that question. What's the second part again?
Did you hear any feedback from Black fathers, Black men, when they saw that, or even seeing that the Bounty Hunter coming out?
Yeah, I think, you know, well, of course, for Hair Love, I heard a lot of people, like, you can't imagine, like, I don't know, you know, if you track, you know, the social media, you just see the images and videos people posting. Like, it's incredible to see the impact that it's had. And you know, I think my dad's got a drop. You know, I think people are definitely excited, but they don't know, you know, they don't know what to expect, right? So they're gonna have to kind of, I think you're gonna have to wait till it drops before it really has any impact. You know, I think people are gonna be pretty excited, pretty happy, but yeah, we'll have to wait to see. We can see. Wait till next year to see.
Yeah. So you're a story artist on Vivo. Like, how does it feel to work on so many projects these days that have people who look like you, but also projects where they look like you, but they have a different culture?
It's been, I love it. I have to say, I really love it. I've been fortunate enough to work on some really, really cool stuff. Like Vivo was super fun. Like when I saw the designs that Joe Mosher was doing of Vivo's owner, I thought that was fantastic. And like the main characters, it was really cool. Working on Mayan 3 was so fantastic. Just working with Jorge, he's so passionate, and like he really is doing this crazy like fantasy deep dive on Latinx culture. It was so cool, and I like hearing stories. That's why I think representation is so important. I like hearing stories from lots of different people's point of view, because I think we watch it to like see the differences. Like we want to feel the things that are same, right? And we want to see the things that are different. So being able to see like, oh wow, that's cool. I didn't know that was like how that culture does things. But then saying like, oh no, but the feelings are still the same, like the attitudes and like that. I'm behind this character. That character is jealous because this happened, and it's set up like this in their culture, so I can see why that would make me mad too. Like I think it's fascinating. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to seeing more. Like there's some things coming up that I think are going to be pretty cool. So
yeah. What do you hope for the future of animation as far as innovation, storylines, characters, etc.?
Well, as far as like innovation, I think I think that some tools are going to be emerging in the next few years that might change things a lot. I'm seeing crazy AI assisted animation, like all sorts of crazy tools. So, just even deepfake, deepfake, I'm like, I don't even know what to think about that. It's going to be, so we're going to see some crazy stuff. And then as far as like, like innovation in storytelling, like I think that animation, I mean, and we're seeing it like as things sort of blur the lines. I mean, if you look at that like Avengers movie, you got Hulk up there talking to Thor, like that's that he doesn't exist. So I think we're probably going to see more blurring of the line between live action and animation. I think we're also going to see animation sort of branch out into different much more different storytelling, where we are going to see like more YA, more adult, so it'll be a little bit more anime, like in terms of like its influence on the industry and the stories that get told. So I think it's exciting time, also crazy time, because so there's going to be some movie that drops that's just going to, like another Spider-Verse is going to drop. It's going to blow people's minds.
Yeah. I mean, since you kind of started out in 2D, I feel like, Into the Spider-Verse was like monumental for 3D, and I thought like Klaus was monumental for 2D because you couldn't tell me that was not 3D. Like I was like, what? Amazing. This is 2D? Because I was looking at the YouTube things, and it would be like the storyboard and then like the coloring, and then it was like texturing and lighting. I'm like, wait, but those are like 3D terms, so I'm confused.
It's incredible.
So what did you think of Klaus?
Oh my, Klaus blew my mind. I was like, that's why I went to the YouTube videos. I'm like, okay, hold on a second. How did they do that? That's crazy. Like, well, first of all, the animation was just like another level. Like, it was like, it's kind of, what it made me feel? It made me feel like, so like you say 2D is dead, but then I see this and like, I feel like that's why there's room for everybody. It's like, all these things, like tell the best story, use the best medium to tell your story. Like the reason that I tell stories in CG is because that's what I came up on, and I know that, but I also like know how I want to push the medium to like get the kind of stories I want. At the same time, do I want to kill 2D? No, I want to see more 2D stuff like Klaus and other animated movies like that. Actually, I want to see a lot more stop mo as well. So I think there's a place for all of it,
And something that I liked about both Into the Spider-Verse and Klaus, like Klaus was like a great like origin story for Santa Claus, where there was like some purposeful things that they did, but then there was some accidental, like him flying through the sky and like, oh, he had the reindeer fly. I thought that was like great, like origin story.
Yeah, and that's a great example of like animation storytelling taking you kind of like, because you can do that in live action, but it just wouldn't have that magic, right? It wouldn't have that like that suspension of belief. That's why sometimes like I pitch a lot of movie ideas and a lot of story ideas. Sometimes I get so why is this animated? And I try to explain like, it puts you in a different like it opens up the suspension of belief. And sometimes people like going, like people want to see live action more. I think that's going to start, that argument's going to start getting less and less valid as we go into the future.
I saw somewhere that you're like excited about the VR, AR, and Quill stuff. Like, what have you seen that you're excited about?
Well, it's funny. That was a few years back. You do your research for sure. I think that it's like I'm super impressed with what you can do. Like even being able to like use like color blobs to like paint characters in real time and be able to turn them around. And the thing that I've seen that I've been pretty impressed with is there's now a number of artists who are making like these crazy VR comics that I think are pretty fantastic. If you actually put on the headset and check them out, it just feels different. It feels very cool. I think they're also like, I think it could also be a really powerful previs tool, like and that's only going to get better. The fidelity on that's only going to get better. It's only going to get better and better. So it's incredible.
So, last question. If someone was producing a documentary about you, what things would you want them to highlight about your life outside of your work in animation?
That's a great question. Definitely, there's a lot of really interesting twists and turns. My early life, early career, just in terms of like personally, and like I did, I touched on a little bit on my parents and how that whole thing shaped my paths, I guess. My also, I think just it'd be interesting, I think, to kind of talk a little bit about the struggles, right? The struggles being a Black animator at that time. And honestly, like, I think I touched on this in other interviews before, like, I was faking it for a long time, you know what I mean? Like, I was faking it, meaning like, hey, yeah, I know how to animate, and I'm like reading manuals as I animate and stuff. And there's that aspect of it where it's just like, where you gotta bootstrap yourself, right? Like in I have no illusions. I know, people at the time were probably saying like, this guy's not the best animator, but like, I'm hoping that people understand that like I was making it up as I was going in my early career, and I was trying to stay afloat. Like I couldn't have a lot. I didn't have a lot of the same amount of money to like go to some schools and stuff. So I made do with what I had, So it'd be kind of interesting to still cover some of those crazy things that happened to me.
Yeah. So, where can people find you on social media?
Oh, okay. So you guys can find me like on Twitter. I want to say it's so funny. I should know my Twitter tag. I think it's Downing at. Yeah. Oh no, it's at Mr. Scribbles. So Mr._Scribbles, and on Instagram it's Downing on Instagram. And if you want to find all those things, they've been compiled on my website, which is www.edowning.com. That's where you can find a link to my comic that I was self-publishing called Book of Mojo, and you can kind of see my reel and that sort of thing. See some of the things. Although it's super old, I got to update it. I haven't updated it in a while.
Well, Everett, thank you for coming on my platform and allowing me to highlight you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun talking with you. I'm super impressed with your sleuthing skills. You found out some stuff. I was like, oh, snap. Okay. You did your homework. I'm impressed. I'm impressed.
And to everyone out there, I want you to like so I know it's real. Comment and tell me how you feel. Subscribe to Seal the Deal and sign up for post notifications to show your zeal. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.
Yeah.